Mayor, it's 4 o'clock.
Going to call the study session to order. Roll call, please.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present. One moment, please. Hold on. Check. Okay.
Okay. First item is clarification for items on the consent calendar. Ms. Daigle.
Question for the city attorney about one of the items on the closed session agenda. I serve on SCAG, and we deal a lot with compensation issues, and one of the things that we were advised is that we can't talk about compensation in closed session of city officials, and that's consistent with 54957. Do you have an opinion or advice for us as far as talking about compensation?
Well, there's actually a separate provision that does allow for the discussion of compensation under kind of the labor negotiation, in the labor negotiation context. That is not noticed on the agenda for this evening. There's been a little bit of dispute among the industry after the Bell case was decided. And so right now we're advising that basically council members form some type of subcommittee to negotiate on salary issues.
Okay.
But my reading of the Brown Act is not prohibitive, but it's not agendized for that this evening.
Okay, so your opinion is a subcommittee can talk about compensation, but the full council can't?
Well, my overall opinion is that reading the Brown Act on its face, that full council can talk about compensation in closed session if it's agendized in the appropriate manner. It's not on the agenda tonight for labor negotiations, which would be the right way to agendize it. So that's not on the agenda for this evening. But a subcommittee could discuss compensation with city manager or anyone else.
Okay, I just want to protect myself and my colleagues that everything's being done consistent with the rules.
Right, and if there is an interest in talking about compensation of the full council, then we'll put it on the agenda for properly for labor negotiations with an unrepresented employee.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hinton.
I have nothing.
Mr. Selich.
No items.
Councilmember Gardner.
None.
Mr. Petros.
No items.
Mr. Hill.
No items.
And I have no items. Move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the Corona Del Mar Entryway Project. Staff have a report.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Today we want to bring back an item that we had talked to you back in January about. This is the entryway to Corona Del Mar, and as we were directed, we went back and re-looked at this, and Pat Thomas will be giving you a report on this and what we found out and present the findings to you.
Thank you, Dave. And good afternoon, Mayor Curry and members of the council. We've got the PowerPoint up on the screen now so we can all see this. Just to give you a little bit of background on this project, as I'm sure you're aware, this was initiated by the Neighborhood Revitalization Committee and one of the 5 citizens advisory panels that were formed by the City Council. And the purpose of the project was to enhance the entryway into Corona Del Mar, to provide for beautification and pedestrian enhancements at the Coast Highway MacArthur Boulevard intersection. There was a traffic study that was conducted in the summer and fall of 2012 to look at moving the lane closure to the west in order to create a wider area to enhance that entryway. And it was determined after review by the City Council on January 8th of this year that moving of that lane closure was going to cause a negative impact to traffic on Coast Highway, and so that concept was abandoned at that point. And the new concept we're looking at now was to basically do an entry enhancement only within the 8-foot parking lane along Coast Highway at that location. This diagram or plan here shows you what the larger entryway concept was, and this was when we were looking at moving the lane closure to the west. Shows the type of landscaping that was being looked at and more of a larger and comprehensive project. And due to the negative impacts of that moving that lane closure, this concept was abandoned, and we've presenting to you this evening some revised design concepts for this area. Just as a visualization here, this is the MacArthur Boulevard looking to the south, what that looks like currently. This is with the enhancement with the landscaping that would be installed and signage along the Coast Highway. This is actually from the enhanced, larger plan. However, the new concepts include very similar landscaping and signage that we'll be presenting to you. Staff did meet with the Business Improvement District and residents associations in Corona Del Mar to discuss the new concept plans, and we presented to them a conceptual plan with Carnation Avenue being kept with two-way traffic on Carnation, and including the additional landscaping along Coast Highway and the removal of the parking on Coast Highway. There was a concern about the loss of the parking at that location, and both the bid and residents did support the plans for the landscaping and increased sidewalk and pedestrian pathway along Coast Highway. We also presented an alternative that showed Carnation Avenue as a one-way street going southbound. This plan did allow for some additional parking on Carnation Avenue and actually allowed us to replace 5 of the 8 parking spaces that would be lost along Coast Highway. One of the concerns that was raised by the bid with adding that parking on Carnation Avenue and with the one-way alternative is that it would impact their ability to have truck deliveries into their businesses along that location. We would like to further explore that, and we'll discuss that a little bit further in the presentation. This is the concept plan with the landscaping, basically widening the sidewalk into the parking lane, so we'd be moving the sidewalk an additional 8 feet into the street and taking the parking off the street. We'd be adding the landscaping along the highway, widening the sidewalk, creating a pedestrian paseo in that area, having some wider and some narrow sidewalk locations, and as you can see, the palm trees kind of framing the highway, and also a signage a plan that would be allowed right at the opposite the MacArthur intersection with Coast Highway, and a concrete seat wall that would frame that landscaping around the sidewalk. And this plan here basically shows no changes to Carnation Avenue. It shows the existing two-way street with rights in and rights out allowed. This revised concept is the concept showing changing Carnation Avenue to one-way only southbound. Allows for some additional landscaping at the corners of Carnation and Coast Highway, narrows the pedestrian crossing on Coast Highway at Carnation, so makes it more pedestrian friendly at that location. Also, one of the concerns with adding the landscaping as a traffic concern is with two-way traffic and cars being able to make the right turn out at Carnation and Coast Highway, there was a concern about sight distance or visibility for traffic, oncoming traffic on Coast Highway. With it only being one way in, there is no longer a concern for that sight distance, so that adds a little bit of safety, changing that to one way from a traffic standpoint. And as you can see, what's shown here is the additional parking. Currently, there's only parking on one side of Carnation Avenue. If we were to change Carnation to one way going southbound, we'd be able to add parking on both sides of Carnation. This is what the bid had brought up as a concern because of the fact they get truck deliveries on Carnation. They were concerned about being able to maintain those truck deliveries if the road was only one way and we had parking on both sides. And again, we'd like to further explore that with the bid representatives.
Pat?
Yes.
Could you please go back to that? On the east approach of PCH, where we're adjacent to the curb lane there, the number 3 lane, how wide is that? Do you have any idea?
I know we're taking that 8-foot parking lane off. I believe that lane is about 12 feet. That's right in the transition where the lane is being dropped in there. I believe it is approximately 12-foot lane.
Between MacArthur and Carnation, the number 3 lane.
It looks like it's a little wider than 12 feet because you're right in the transition between where the normal lane width, the number 2 and number 3 lane are kind of merging together right in there. So it actually is, I think it's a little bit wider than a standard 12-foot lane.
Thank you.
And again, just to discuss a little bit more the changing of Carnation to one way between Coast Highway and 4th Avenue and in that southbound direction only. Again, some of the reasons for doing that, there's a relatively low volume of traffic northbound, a much higher volume of traffic currently on that street going south and north. So changing that to one way would not dramatically impact the access on northbound. Again, it eliminates that concern about sight distance. With that widened sidewalk and landscaping on Coast Highway, doesn't impact any sight distance issues for northbound traffic if it's only southbound. creates a possibility for those 5 additional parking spaces on Carnation Avenue to make up for the lost parking spaces on Coast Highway, and also provides for some additional landscaping at the corners, both on the north corners and on the south corners, where the road will be narrowed down to improve it to just a one-way direction. And again, it also allows for a little bit better pedestrian flow, because the crossing of Carnation on Coast Highway now is a little bit shorter distance. You wouldn't have that pork chop in the center there. You currently have to cross over to get from one side of Carnation to the other. And just to discuss that issue of the replacement of the lost 8 parking spaces on Coast Highway, again, by changing Carnation to one way, we can make up 5 of those parking spaces. One of the other concepts that was presented was to potentially look at adding some parking at the old school park site in order to try to make up for all of those lost parking spaces. And we estimated that we could provide for up to approximately 10 parking spaces by creating a new row of parking. It would impact the park site by removing a little bit of the turf area, but we could include some additional parking at that park site. And we would like to include addressing these lost parking spaces in the parking study that is beginning right now, involving both the city staff and the CDM bid. In terms of costs of the improvements for this entry project, staff estimates that the final engineering costs for these improvements would be approximately $50,000. Our estimate for constructing the improvements for the one-way option on Carnation, construction cost of $350,000. If the two-way option were to be chosen, the construction cost would be less because of the fact that we wouldn't have to construct quite as much improvements to narrow down those corners on both the north and south side of Carnation. So our estimate on the two-way option was $250,000, and we estimated that adding this landscaping would add approximately $20,000 a year in annual maintenance costs. At this point, staff's recommendation is for council to direct staff to proceed with Concept 3, which is the reduced landscaping, moving the curb out 8 feet and removing the parking off the Coast Highway and adding the landscaping and pedestrian improvements. Staff is recommending that we proceed with the alternative for changing Carnation to one-way southbound between Coast Highway and 4th Avenue. And staff would be working with the bid representatives to address their concern about truck deliveries on Carnation due to the narrower section of Carnation and the parking that would be added to the street. We would also, again, like to include the discussion about those lost parking spaces in the CDM parking study that will be starting here soon. And lastly, regarding funding, staff is requesting direction from the council to address both the $50,000 design costs involved in the final engineering for the project, as well as the estimate of $350,000 for the construction costs associated with this project. That concludes staff report, and be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Haddon, or Mr. Hill.
Thank you. With respect to the parking on Carnation, has there been any consideration given? I mean, one of the issues or complaints I remember from before was, you know, apartment people would park there and park all day long. Of making those 1 hour spots or anything of that sort, and if there was, might part of the delivery issue be that the parking was reserved for deliveries from 6 to 8 a.m. or something of that sort, when we would like to schedule deliveries before traffic comes into the area anyway.
Yes, and we haven't finalized exactly what that parking would look like and whether we would do that with any restrictions. Currently, there is one section of the curb on Carnation that is designated for 30-minute only parking, so there is at least a precedent for doing some time limit parking on the street. But we haven't finalized that plan for parking, and we did want to work further with the bid regarding their deliveries and whether time restrictions would be a better way to go.
Any other questions for staff? Councilmember Gardner.
Although it was reviewed by the CAP, it actually began with the bid, is their idea. And I know they have contributed funds to get us this far. The bid contributes to a lot of the maintenance on the in the city as well, the Corona Del Mar area. Would this be the city's responsibility or the BID's responsibility, or has that been discussed?
Well, once the improvements would be installed, it would be the city responsibility because these would all be improvements within the city's right-of-way.
All right. And then something that the BID might want to consider as we're looking at the cost, the design cost, particularly whether they would consider that part of the city's contribution, which it makes to the BID annually, that this might be part of that in some way, something to consider.
Yes, thank you. The $20,000 in maintenance seems a little on the high side. How many square feet of landscaping is there to maintain in there?
I don't have the exact square footage. I would just estimate the one block is probably, I'm going to guess, 300 feet by approximately 15 feet. So we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 square feet.
Okay, it seems a little on the high side, but how did you arrive at that number?
That's just a very rough ballpark estimate. We also are planning to install some decorative paving in the pedestrian corridor area, and there would be some steam cleaning and some additional maintenance involved in maintaining those type of improvements as well.
Questions? All right, seeing no further questions, let me open this up to the audience. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this matter? Please come forward. Going once.
Doesn't someone from the BID want to speak?
Going twice.
Bernie Svalstad, Business Improvement District Chairman. I really appreciate the staff and the council considering this. 2 or 3 things. Jim has a few comments about it. Oh, God. Excuse me. Sorry. Couple things. I think that if there's a problem, which Jim will bring up some questions about the one-way street that he's found out since we met with the staff and some other people. So I think the one-way street may be a little problem, but I think hopefully we could work out the parking maybe in that some other area nearby, as the staff has already just mentioned. So that would bring it down to $250,000. The bid would be more than willing to participate in some manner with the city on our budget to assist in this program. The $20,000 is high, I think, Mr. Selich and staff, I would think, because we pay $1,000 a month, it's $12,000 a year to maintain 180 tree wells in the city. I don't know what the square footage and all, but I think that could be done for less than $20,000 a year. So we'd love to have this progress as expedient as possible. As I mentioned in the last few meetings I've talked, and I think, like I say, if for some reason, which Jim will bring up some problems we would have to resolve on a one-way street that we hadn't known up to this point, we'd like to, that'd bring it down to $250 plus $50, the way I understand the previous information, cut it down $100,000. But anyway, we're in favor of this. We'd like to see it approved for this year's budget, and I'll have Jim talk about some problems that he's discovered since our last meetings with the staff in regard to the one-way street.
Good afternoon. Jim Walker, the member of the BID and also the Bungalow Restaurant. First of all, again, I'd like to thank the staff. I think they've done a great job. They've put in a lot of time, and frankly, I like the new design. I think it's a great compromise. The only 2 issues, really, and I had sent some photographs to Mike, and unfortunately, we weren't able to get them into the PowerPoint. But part of the problem with Carnation is both restaurants, mine, not only mine, but El Ranchito and, to a degree, the Wine Gallery, different purveyors such as Cisco, U.S. Foods, deliver in tractor trailers. And what they do is they bring their tractor trailers either going down Carnation, but they will park in the red. and put cones out and unload their trucks because they're not able to negotiate the turns into either driveway. And if they do, they're not able to negotiate their way out of it. So what happens is if we go ahead and put this parking, and I think Rush's idea has some value, if we put time limits on it, because we're not going to be getting deliveries, say, after 5 o'clock generally, and we can relay to our purveyors that they have until 5 o'clock to get those deliveries to the restaurants. So we have a little control over that. The other, but if we were to put cars on, I guess that would be, the east side of Carnation, going towards Laguna. I also noticed, and I relayed this also, that the curb is about well over a foot high. It's an unusually high curb. So if you're in the driver's side of your car and you park it, you're not going to get out unless you want to climb over the passenger seat. So parking on that side of the street, unless there's some modification to the curb, is not going to be useful because, again, you can't get out. So that's one issue. How you might design or go about changing the sidewalk is beyond me, but that's not what I do. But that's just one thing that is kind of a problematic. I think that having Carnation being one way is a good idea. I think that it would expedite the traffic flow. I think it would help the traffic flow both on PCH as well as Carnation. However, I'm not sure that the parking is going to be an alternative for us. One of the things that was mentioned is the old school park. I think that we really should take a close look at that and consider that. I'm sure there will be some backlash on that, but actually there's very little usage of that park, and I think we could still maintain a park presence and accomplish putting some parking there, which would offset the loss of parking on Pacific Coast Highway. So overall, I think it's a good plan. I think, there's some issues, but I think they can be worked out. I'm just not sure that the one-way will work with the parking on that side of Carnation. So that's all I have to tell you. Any questions or anything?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any other speakers who'd like to speak on this matter? Please come forward. All right, seeing none, well, here comes one.
Good afternoon. Robert Hawkins. I represent community groups in the city. There is no allocation on the budget for environmental documentation for this project. I think that needs to be added, and that will add to your time frame. And secondly, I think the budget also needs to have a provision for coastal review and approval because, of course, this isn't the coastal zone. Thank you very much.
Any other speakers? All right, then I'll close public comment, bring it back. Councilmember Gardner.
I think that anything we do is tied very tightly to the parking. This has been to the Residents Association, but it hasn't really been to the neighborhood. We saw the reactions. We got all sorts of reactions all over the place when we're talking about the pinch lane, and they only came after we really, started to do something. We're going to have the same thing here. The residents have been impacted by the restaurants. We've heard about that. We've heard their unhappiness. And there's always been a concern that this is not a beautification project. This is a project to give the restaurants space so they can have outdoor dining. Not that I think the residents object to outdoor dining, but they know that you don't have to meet the same parking requirements. And so they see an impact to their neighborhood. So as we go along, I think it's very important that we make a bigger effort to start to reach out to the residents in this area, and I think we can utilize the Residents Association for that, to be sure that they're aware, so we're bringing them along, and that we incorporate these ideas very carefully with our traffic study, with our parking study, so that at the end, everybody can embrace it and nobody feels something is being imposed upon them.
Okay. Any other comments? Well, I would echo Councilmember Gardner's comments. I mean, I think this is a good plan, but it needs to be done with a lot of community input. It needs to be done very methodically. I think the one-way issue needs to be reviewed in light of the practical impacts on business. I don't know whether we need to do an environmental impact report to plant trees or not, but somebody will figure that part out. I'd like to see us engage the community through some proactive outreach on these questions. And I would not object if we funded part of this in the budget to start the process going forward, frankly. But I want to make sure that we have a plan that the community is behind before we push forward.
If I could interject, Mr. Mayor, that was one of the intents tonight. We wanted to show this project to you before the budget presentation. We wanted some general guidance. It sounds like we have some of that. We're going to continue to work with the community. There's a lot of work to do there, but there are decisions coming up in tonight's budget on how you want to proceed with this project, and we'd look for your advice there.
Okay, thank you.
I did have one other question, Dave. So if we were to decide to proceed with this in the next month or two, you need to go through design. Would this be a project that would be constructible in this coming year's budget?
There's a lot of factors. I think it may be. It depends where the coastal is, because we do have to address the parking, and they're probably going to want to know about the parking study, which Councilmember Gardner talked about. That's kind of key to it. We think we can get 5 spaces. We're going to have to find some more. We haven't explored the school site. There are other options. Maybe it's a very tight area, but we'd have to solve that piece of the puzzle before we'd probably actually go into design. So it may take more than a year, but we surely want to get started on that. The discussion we'll have tonight, just to kind of start that, is that we have in the budget $50,000 shown just for a contribution for design. We weren't sure how to do this. We need council's guidance. There is no money actually right now programmed for construction.
Okay, you think you know what you got? We have what you need? Okay, thank you. Next item is the budget overview.
So, Mr. Mayor and...
Oh, I did do public comment. Never mind, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor and council members, this is your first look and the community's first look at our proposed budget for the fiscal year that begins July 1st of 2013. We're going to do this presentation in a broad brush over the budget parameters and the budget process, and Dan Medishevitz is going to lead that. And then Dan is going to stop his presentation about half the way in and then hand that over to Dave Webb, and we're going to get into more depth in the CIP part of it, because that is where a lot of your input and discretion is important, especially this afternoon. As Dan will explain, you'll have a couple of other opportunities, as will the community, to look at this budget. And that includes the next meeting on the 28th, and then our goal is adoption on June 11th. So with that, I'm going to hand this over.
A question on the procedures. So at the next meeting, I mean, this is the Finance Department and Public Works, basically. They're presenting theirs. Is it going to be departmental, or how is the rest of it going to be conducted?
The way I've set this up is that we would not have individual departmental presentations. If you had a specific question, if you wanted to do that, certainly we could, probably at the next meeting. If you had a specific question that you thought should be addressed that we couldn't satisfactorily address today, that a lot of the department heads are here, and I'll be writing a list of things that will involve some follow-up. And we're going to spend some more time on those key follow-up issues on the 28th.
Okay, well, then I'll just send you something if I don't see it today. All right, thank you.
So with that, Dan.
Thank you, Dave. We're just waiting for the presentation to appear on the screen. We're good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. First and foremost, the budget is balanced. It is balanced while we are increasing our investments in community-serving facilities, meaning parks, buildings, and other beautification projects. Thirdly, the budget puts more police officers on the street while reducing total staffing. In preparing the budget, we are complying with our charter requirements. We're following our typical budget procedures, albeit on a shortened time frame due to the Civic Center move. As for the remaining budget calendar, as Dave suggested, today is the first broad brush overview. You'll have 2 weeks to absorb what you've heard today, and Council on the 28th study session will have the opportunity to make revisions to the budget by adding or deleting items from what we call the budget checklist, which is just a running list of revisions. At this meeting, council could also discuss sponsorship of community events or other key decision points that you think are important. Council at this meeting should also set the public hearing date for June 11th. And then on June 11th, after holding the public hearing, the council should adopt the budget with any changes you see fit. The next slide includes a very broad brush overview of the entire budget, including all restricted revenue sources and CIPs. There's a lot of volatility when you look at the budget in total. The main things I'll point out, you'll see the general fund is increasing at the revenues at a muted rate of about 2.19%, and our general fund operating expenditures at about 1.6%. Drilling down, we can start looking at the surplus that the general fund will generate when we take a look at all revenue sources for both years. We have to strip out certain revenues that are mandated set-asides. We add in the rest of the expenditures, and we get to a surplus amount. I will point out that the printed documents included a initial projected estimate of $750,000. After reviewing the expenditures further, we were able to dial them down another 1.8, leaving an adjusted surplus balance of $2.6 million, roughly the same amount that we're estimating for fiscal year 2012 and 13, very conservatively. In light of this, we are recommending through the checklist a couple additional transfers out to our facilities financing planning reserve, as well as a new concept with all these buildings. A transfer will create a facilities maintenance plan for these buildings, so we would like to start funding that program, which will leave you with a net surplus of about $1.1 million for fiscal year 2013-14 to further prioritize.
Dan, can I ask you a question back on
Sure.
that one? On your second line, it has transfers in all sources.
Correct.
And there's, I would say, probably a significant difference between 12-13 and 13-14. Can you explain that?
In 12-13, a good part of that are really assignments. We set aside at the end of 2014 about $13 million worth of assignments. I'm sorry, in 12-13. And in 14, we still really have a difference in the way we initially budget and the way we finally close our books. So we would get into a lot of weeds if we got into those differences. But I'd be happy to go over those with you at some other time. So if we were to look at revenues, just putting them in the order of magnitude, you can see 47% of our revenues are generated from property taxes. When we drill down to our revenue comparison, we can see that property taxes appear to also have a muted increase from year to year. Really, we're projecting a secured property tax increase of 4%, but because of certain one-time revenue sources we received in 2013-14, due to the dissolution of the redevelopment agencies, we have a more muted apparent increase to 13-14. When we look at our overall increases from pre-recession levels, you can see sales tax, although it has reached greater levels than it was in 2007. When we look at the compounded annual growth rate, it is scratching back to the surface albeit better than it was reached higher levels than pre-recession levels. When we look at revenues in total, that same compounded annual growth rate since 2007 is a fairly low, less than 1% annual growth. Same thing, establishing the order of magnitude on expenditures. You could see the vast majority of our expenditures are spent on public safety. When we look at expenditures, what I would like to also show you is that the compounded annual growth when we has from 1 year to, well, 1 year change is about 1.5% on the operating budget. Since 2008, that compounded annual growth, since 2012, the compounded annual growth is less than 1%. But we do see a large ramp up in both our capital improvement expenditures as well as our general fund contributions to our facilities financial planning reserve. We see large increases in those areas. And that's an intended ramp up to increase our high quality environment. So when we look at what this budget was built around, we tried to build it across certain priorities. The priorities, I think, are a critical link to establish between the community priorities and the proposed budget. We emphasize both public safety, a smarter, smaller government, and that high-quality physical environment. So you can see included in this budget is a new crime suppression unit, which includes 3 officers and a sergeant, as well as a reinvestment in our 800 megahertz system. This is a critical investment that will maintain interagency communication, not only within our departments, but within the county-wide system, assuming we have a large-scale emergency. We're also increasing our investment in IT strategic investments. We're upgrading our enterprise resource planning module as well as computer-aided dispatch, online permitting system, and then increasing our presence with web and phone applications. We're also trying to hit that priority of being a smarter, smaller government. We are continuing to outsource certain applications. We've just completed the transition of our parking lot handover to central parking systems, and we'll continue a lot of automation there. We have outsourced our printing, and we've also, through IT's hard work, have reduced the number of personal printers that we have on site to these multi-state, multi-function printers. We've reduced about 130 printers citywide. We're also trying to shrink the workforce, and in this budget we've reduced the workforce by 16 full-time employees and 14 part-time full-time equivalents. We're increasing employee pension contributions. We've introduced lower-tier benefits to new employees. We're accelerating our payments on our unfunded pension liability, and we're proposing to accelerate payments on our retiree insurance unfunded liability as well. 2010, you can see that we've reduced the number of full-time positions by nearly 100 positions. Again, we are increasing pension contributions made by employees to approximately $5 million by fiscal year 14, and hopefully up to $7 million by fiscal year 2016. So our third priority, that high-quality physical environment, we're concentrating on neighborhood beautification projects, which I believe Dave Webb will speak a lot to. We're increasing our investment in community-serving facilities. We're going to be updating our general plan update. We're doing an airport EIR, as well as slightly increasing supplementing our reforestation efforts. So we talk about our facilities financial planning reserve fund in 13-14. These are the projects we are planning to cash fund. The proposed budget amounts for these projects you can see in the 13-14 column, as well as the estimated total costs. Excuse me, the first row is really the general fund, normal kind of streets and facilities projects outside the facilities program. With that, I'll turn it over to David Webb to talk about the CIP program.
Dan, question for you. So with those projects, what will be our, will we be using reserves to pay for those? You noted we're paying cash.
We are funding our facilities financing fund through general fund cash contributions, developer contributions, as well as interest earnings. So as we ramp up those reserves, we will be paying cash and using our facilities financing reserve what it was intended to be used for.
Okay, and I may have missed the slide. What are you projecting as far as our reserves for the next year?
We'll get to that after the CIP presentation, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize the point that our spending for these parks and other capital improvement projects is all cash funded. And Mr. Mayor, while Mr. Webb sets up, I know I've beat this drum before. Dan kind of glossed over the fact that we are accelerating payments to our unfunded liabilities. I would like to make it clear to the public that by virtue of the actions of this council, that we have set forth a strategy to pay off our current unfunded liability in a realized time, in a time certain. We must be one of the only cities in Orange County that has taken that strategy and has the wherewithal to do that. So that shouldn't be lost on the public as we move forward with this ambitious capital plan.
Mr. Mayor, I had one other question.
Councilmember Daigle?
I'm not sure where your presentation is going to be, Dave, but in the prior presentation it noted the addition of the police officers. Are we going to hear more about police, or?
If you would like to hear more about that on the 28th, we can do that.
Okay.
I can add that to my list.
I'm supportive of it. As a matter of fact, I told my constituents last night at East Bluff, so I kind of committed to it. I did commit to it, but where are we on contracting out the jail in terms of the process of that?
We had a request for proposals come back from a number of firms. We're discussing that with at a staff level with one of the top firms. At the same time, we're also doing some meet and confer items on that relating to our jail custody officers. We expect to have more information for you on the 28th or the 11th as to that, but it is still kind of within the meet and confer realm, so I'm not comfortable talking about it beyond what I just said.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, good afternoon again, and this is your capital improvement program. A lot of this you've seen in our various previews, but I will have some background slides for the public who don't or have no familiarity with the capital improvement program or how we set priorities and things, so if you'll bear with me. And feel free to ask questions along the way. There's a lot of information in this, and I'm happy to take your questions. As we get into our capital improvement program, so I get my clicker here. The capital improvement program is something we use that sets priorities and appropriates funds for the city. This program provides a basis for project planning and identifies potential conflicts in our projects. We also use it to develop and construct identified public improvements. It addresses significant maintenance items and responds to changing priorities and conditions. It's an evolving document. Before we go too far into this coming year, I'd like to stop and just look back at the current year. We had a lot of work done this last year. On this slide, you kind of see we have 18 major construction projects completed. Those are things you see during the year. You see a notice of completion. There's one on your agenda tonight. When we do a major project, we file a notice of completion. We count that, and there's about $14 million that was delivered there. That's not everything that's in your capital improvement program. There's all kinds of planned studies and other things in there. This is just the construction component. We also have some performance measures that Council requested us put in place a few years ago, so we monitor that. And the first one is we want to deliver our projects within 2 months of our stated bid goals of delivery. And we're running at actual 89% of that. Our goal was to be 85% compliant. This year we ended up at 89%. We also want to stay within the change order contingencies that Council approves when we adopt budgets. Right now we're at basically compliant on all our projects, 100%. I will note that you have given us several times this year 15% contingencies versus 10, which is our typical, because we've opportunized on some good bid prices and things like that. We've added to it. So we do have, in some cases, a 15% contingency, but in all cases, we did not exceed the council-approved contingency. With that, we had a lot of deliveries, and we have a lot of ongoing work. So part of our workload is, and there's approximately $30 million in design and construction currently. And here's a list of some of these, and I do summarize in this because there's a lot of work going through, but this is the significant ones where we have the large park projects with the Marina Park and Sunset Ridge and Sunset View started. The Civic Center project, as we're sitting in today, is almost done, and we're closing that out. Santa Heights Pavement, which is the project that followed the undergrounding, and that's just about to start the paving at the end of this month. Peninsula Point pavement replacements ongoing right now out on the point on Channel Road. We have alley replacements going on. We've done the Central Balboa ones, and we're now moving into Newport Heights. Big Canyon Reservoir cover is actually underway. That project is, hopefully we're working down in the reservoir now. We'll be putting that cover in place and get that reservoir back up. We have concrete streets being replaced. We have slurry going on in West Newport. Balboa Boulevard landscape, we just went through the final revisions on that and getting ready to get that project going at the end of the summer. Corona Del Mar water main, we've approved that by council recently, and we look for that construction to start soon out of Corona Del Mar. We also have water quality work. One of our things we're doing is with the ASBS water quality projects out there. So there's quite a lot of work that's constantly going, and this is a snapshot when we look at this as today. The capital improvement program flows over budget years. We always have carryover thing because it's an ongoing process.
Dave, quick question. You know, we're doing a lot of slurry work on the west side, but will that include that Newport Boulevard and Balboa Boulevard? We're doing a lot of side streets and areas like that. What's the plan for those major streets?
Usually, we don't typically slurry arterials. It's a little problematic. One, because the slurry takes so long to cure, we have to take the arterial down. And two, if you've looked at arterials that have been slurried, and I have some around my house, you can get about 5 years out of it, and then they start losing all the fines, and you get a little chatter and thing because at a little higher speed it causes problems. It's not to say we wouldn't, and in some cases I might recommend we slurry an arterial. We have done that. For instance, a good one would be maybe Newport Boulevard right in front of the old City Hall. It's starting to fall apart. We want to get that street to last a little longer. A slurry is a maintenance item. It kind of keeps the water out and keeps the pavement together for a little further, but generally we don't. The good news is, as we come into this new year, we are improving. Our neighborhoods are being beautified. More parks are underway. We have our pavement condition index improving. We're actually back to putting $5 million in the general fund back into the CIP. We're making investments in the harbor. This single synchronization is just about done. We've spent a lot of time on that. This should be the last year on that. So we're seeing a lot of significant improvements in council goals. With that, we move into this year's projects. And for the audience and the folks watching at home, I just wanted to tell you kind of how projects are selected. We have a series of master plans that we go to. We have a facility financing plan that looks at our buildings, our fire stations, our parks, the large facility items. We have a pavement management plan that we follow. It looks at our pavement indexes and tracks and gives us a guidance to what projects we should be spending our money on next. We have a water master plan and a sewer master plan that looks at the age of our pipes, facilities, and plugs in capital and maintenance projects. And we recently completed and have a Tidelands capital plan now that we're looking at, and that's helping program projects for our harbor in our Tidelands areas. Projects are also coming out of the council. We have priorities that are delivered by council, and we come up and get projects out of that. Council also identifies certain projects, or the community or staff will identify projects. And then some projects we have are actually required by federal law, state law, and even legal actions, like we've had some ADA work recently on that. So as we move forward, we look at council priorities, and one of your priorities was neighborhood revitalization, and you've had this for some time now, and we build that into the CIP. We're looking to rehabilitate aging infrastructure. We're improving the city traffic flow, looking to install new and improved landscaping in the city. This helps encourage private development and redevelopment of sites. We're looking to build and improve parks and recreational facilities, along with looking into underground utilities on major arterials. One of the other goals that Council has set for us is the tidelands management, and we're looking in this case to improve boating and visitor supporting facilities and services to the community. We want to repair, maintain our beaches, our piers, our bulkheads, and our seawalls. We spend a lot of time in dredging. We still have some additional dredging to do. And also in the tidelands, we're looking at our water quality and constantly trying to improve the water quality of the city. So as we move into this year's budget and the budget that you've been presented, it includes 73 items, and I call these programs, projects, supplemental expenses. We have things in there that actually build. We have programs to help get our local coastal plan done. We have supplementary expenses, like, for instance, Jamboree Avenue will be repaid by Irvine, and we just have a $500,000 contribution to them. So there's a lot of things in the CIP. This year it totals $61 million. There's $35 million in new funding and $26 million in rebudgets coming over the top. I'll stop on rebudgets for a minute because I noted that it's an evolving document. It doesn't stop at calendar years. It goes right through the fiscal years. We do have a lot of rebudget here. We have 4 significant projects in the rebudget category. We have $8.7 million in there for Sunset Ridge that's been carried, and we're hoping to get our coastal permits. We have another $5.3 million in Marina Park that we're hoping to get our coastal permits that's carrying over. We have some significant pavement projects like Bay Avenue that we talked about. We purposely put this project off because we had so much work on the peninsula. We chose to start it after Labor Day. That's $1.6 million. We have another $1.3 million on Bayside Drive that we're working on. That's $17 million right there in 4 projects that are basically teed up. We're just ready to get them going as the summer and the permits materialize. We also, as I said, it's a snapshot. Since this snapshot was taken, there's $424,000 that's been encumbered. Some of that you'll see tonight. In fact, tonight you have an engineering contract for Old Newport Boulevard that's $324,000 that was originally in the snapshot, but now it comes out of the rebudget and goes into the encumbered. With that, I show this slide to you every year, and it's a relevant slide. It kind of gives you a heartbeat of where we're at, and it talks about our new budgets, our rebudgets, our adjusted budgets, and then the approved budget. And the big line on top, the red one, is kind of the heartbeat. This is where we do, it's basically the adjusted budget. As we adopt this year and we go through the year, and you'll see why it's been spiking, we traditionally in the last few years have added to this budget. We've added City Hall, we've added Oasis, we've added big projects mid-year into this. And there's a good reason for that. Sometimes we don't have all the cost information. Sometimes we don't want to over-program too much money into the budget, and it's better to wait till we get the bids and actually put it in there. So there's a lot of information on this. I would note at the bottom, too, that the budget has been climbing. The gold line is kind of representing the approved budget, and it's been kind of inking up about $20,000 every 4 or 5 years, $20 million, I'm sorry. At the bottom is the full-time equivalent staff in the Public Works Department, and it's pretty much stayed the same. We have had a spike in 2011. That's when we absorbed the Harbor Resources and the Water Quality Group. But since then, through attrition and efficiencies, we brought that back down to 33 staff. So as we move forward, council priorities, quality facilities is our first category in our capital improvement program. And with our facilities, we have several this year. We have $4.2 million in facilities. And again, not all the projects are listed. I just took out the highlights, and I'd be happy to answer questions on anything in the budget. We're looking to start the design effort on the Corona Del Mar fire station. We have several fire stations in our facility.
On that, are we satisfied that that's an excellent position for a fire station? I know there's been some review of stations.
I think
maybe that's something we could address next time or something.
And I would speak a little to that. We haven't finalized that. I know the fire department's now going to do a study on how they deliver fire services, so we didn't plan to actually start the design until some of those questions are answered. We are also looking at sites. It's a tricky site. It may be there, it may be at the lot behind it, but those will be answered, then we'll start the design. We had the lifeguard headquarters interior rehabilitations. We actually chose not to do it last year to keep the budget tight. This year we're proposing to do the construction of that. The design's done, and after the summer, when we get past Labor Day, we'd plan on starting that project. We have some work at the police facility. All the HVAC units on top, the pocket facilities, are old and need to be replaced, so we've included that in here. It's about $150,000. We have improvements over at San Miguel Park. The restrooms are old, maintenance problem. Municipal Operations Department is having a lot of problems with that. We're going to replace that restroom along with the picnic structure around it. We've had a lot of wood rot. They've already removed the wood beams over the structure, so we want to replace that this year. And then we had a request for the Newport Coast Community Center. It originally was built with the stage. The Recreation Department has not had a lot of use for the stage. They actually have more use for more offices or if they'd like to put a wall across their partition and include that for their pre-K and camp programs. Another council priority is our quality streets, and we have been making a lot of improvement in this area. I'm sorry, did I have a question? Under streets, we have basically street and drainage. There's $18 million being programmed this year. $8.3 million is in the arterial areas, the large streets. Another $6.2 million in our local street system. We have $2.8 million going into landscaping and street landscape this year. And then there's a small amount, $0.7 million in drainage.
Dave?
Yes.
Of that 8.3, how much of that's leveraged, OCTA or other funds? Is that all ours?
It's not all ours. I don't have a number. We typically have a significant portion of that in grants. I think maybe, Jamie, can we get that for later on? Is there a way to?
Maybe next time.
Okay.
Good.
I can
Thank you.
show it in the pie chart.
Thank you.
And with that, I mentioned our pavement management plan. I like to keep this slide up every year. This is an evolving document, so we put it up for you to look and the residents to look at. On the bottom there, you'll see the website to know. Anybody can go to our website. They can look at this plan, kind of get an idea where we're looking to do pavement next. We try to project out many years for utilities purposes, for our purposes. We share this with Southern California Edison, the gas company, to try to get them to think ahead and put their utilities in before we start paving streets. It does evolve. It does change. We put a little note on there, but this is the general pattern. You can see the green on there. That's this year's program. That's what we mentioned, the slurries going on in West Newport, some of the arterial work that's going to be happening. And next year we'll be heading into Newport Heights, which is kind of the yellowish tan there. With that, we've been doing a lot of work in our pavement areas, and I'm proud to say our pavement index has been climbing. Back in 2009, we had an overall city index, and there's 3 indexes here we're looking at. There's the middle line, which is the city-wide index. That's all our pavement. There's the top line, which is arterials only, and then the red line is our residential system. We had a basically pavement index back in 2009 overall of 75. We've now got to the point we're just about at 80 on that, which is a great improvement. I think we've been doing a lot of work in there. You want to keep your pavement probably 80, 82, no more than that. That's probably excellent range, and you're not spending money just to keep up a good street. You're doing good valued engineering on that.
Yeah, I think it's really noteworthy that index, the overall index increase is really entirely due to improvement in residential streets maintenance. So it's nice to see that for the residents.
And we look to do more of that. You notice our arterials are in pretty good shape. So we're going to probably do less arterials in the coming years and try to keep focusing on those residential streets to bring those up.
Dave, where is our ranking within the context of the county? Because someone could see 80 and say, oh, well, you got a B, but what is really the sort of the significance around 80 and 85, and where is that within the county?
It's relatively high. I can't tell you. I didn't look at all the county. They do that once in a while with OCTA. We were in the top group of that, but OCTA now requires that all the cities try to get above 75, so they're all trying to push up to that using their Measure M funds. And I can get the exact number if you'd like later. When we talk about pavement, too, I thought I'd take a little detour here to give a little Pavement 101 course, because some people aren't familiar with some of the things we do. There are several ways we maintain our pavement, and you'll see sometimes you just go out and there's a bunch of black squiggly lines on it. In this picture, you can see a little of that on the right-hand side there. That's what we do is crack seal, and we try to seal the joints to keep the water out of the pavement. It's the first preventive maintenance item we do. Obviously, the water is what causes the potholes and deterioration. This is actually the slurry seal program right here that we're showing you. It's a maintenance item. It's not so much structural. It rejuvenates the wearing course. It seals the pavement so we keep the wear and the water out of the pavement and extends the life of that. This type of treatment runs usually about 23 cents a square foot all in. That's just kind of a base. And we do this about every 7 years. We've got our city now on a 7-year program. It's recommended every 7 to 10 years. We're in the 5th year of our 7-year program. We started that obviously 5 years ago, and it's been real successful. The residents have really given us some great feedback on getting their streets refreshed. We come in and do the striping and everything at the same time. The next level would be more of a structural level, and this is what we call a grind and overlay. We usually grind off about 2 inches of asphalt and put a new wearing course back. It actually adds the structure to the pavement. This is more significant. This is about $1.80 a square foot, just to give you a relevant figure compared to slurry.
Dave,
I've heard that that there's blacktop, or whatever you call it. I call it blacktop because it's always black when you put it on. But there are materials that are lighter in color because our streets are one of the major sources of heat islands. And is there much more expensive to put the lighter color material on? Does it not wear as well? I'm just wondering why we don't consider that.
There is concrete is obviously a lighter color. I haven't seen too much in terms of asphalt. You could get an aggregate which would lighten it up. We haven't really specified that. It might cause a little cost because they'd have to go find that lighter aggregate. I don't know of a material like a dye or anything you can put in there. There are some paints and things you can put on asphalt, but you're kind of limited with that. We do use a rubberized asphalt, which tends to be a little darker, and the residents like that, and it actually uses recycled latex and rubber in there, and we use that on our arterials.
So we get points for recycling, meanwhile the temperature soars.
Yes. The last item we have is complete reconstruction, and that's where we'll completely take the pavement out, the base out, and rebuild the street. And this is the last thing we want to do. This is very expensive. This typically runs for an asphalt street about $5.50 a square foot. If we're in our concrete streets, we've been getting prices for about $7.20 a square foot all in. The difference being in the value we're finding on the concrete side, which is a lighter pavement. The asphalt streets last for about 15 to 20 years before we have to grind and overlay them again and do substantial reconstruction. A concrete street can last 60, 80 years. We have some probably approaching 100 years. So you get much more value for when you rebuild the street with concrete.
Is it very, very difficult when you have an asphalt street to take it out and put the concrete in, or is it the same process, except for you're pouring concrete instead of the rest of it?
It's the removal is the same challenge, taking it out. Putting it back, there's more curing time and more downtime on concrete, so doing an arterial, for instance, you probably don't have the luxury of that much time to take it out of play. Maybe a residential street might make good sense if we're going to take all the asphalt.
Have we ever done cost projections? Just say, hey, it's more up front, but if it can last 50 years, I mean, they can look like, when they start cracking, they don't necessarily look so good, but have we ever done that?
We actually have, in fact, a lot of our streets going back in are concrete right now. We have Peninsula Point. We're taking out concrete streets. We haven't taken out too many asphalt streets, but we are in the process of taking out concrete, and we are putting concrete back because the value is good right now.
Oh, so we're not taking concrete out and putting asphalt. We're replacing the concrete.
We're putting concrete.
But we're not adding concrete to where we haven't had it before.
Not currently, but there are some alleys and things. We're taking out the asphalt alleys and putting concrete back in there.
Okay, thanks.
What was your concrete price per square foot?
Right now, we're getting about $7.20. That's complete with removal and replacement and all the work around it. So it's probably the lowest I've seen it in quite some time. So in our arterial class of streets, we have several major ones going on. Newport Boulevard's our first one at 32nd Street. We continue on this project. These are long-term projects where we're looking to add a third lane, also bike lanes along Newport Boulevard right in front of the old City Hall site. We're starting another project, which obviously the design will start tonight with the award of that if you approve that contract. This is West Coast Highway at Old Newport. We'd like to provide a third left turn lane going through lane going westbound underneath the bridge, and also a right turn pocket and a bicycle lane going through that intersection. Dover Drive in Westcliff is another project we're starting on. We had a recent presentation by the Orange County Sanitation District. They're going to be starting a new trunk main going up from Coast Highway all the way up to Irvine Avenue on Dover. We want to follow right behind that with a new pavement street job, and we'll be replacing the medians and landscaping at the same time. We have another project I mentioned earlier, Jamboree Road repaving. This is actually being done by the City of Irvine. We're going to contribute $500,000 to that because the west side of Jamboree is the City of Newport Beach. The east side is Irvine, and that goes from MacArthur all the way to Culver. We're also doing a couple other arterial segments, Campus Drive and San Joaquin Hills. There's little segments in there that need to be overlaid, so we'll be grinding and overlaying those streets this year. And then we started another program recently with this major arterial point repair. And we pull this out separately because as you go around town, there's certain areas, left turn pockets, you get heaving, certain areas that are broken up due to specific wear that we need to go in and surgically take care of. It's a little more challenging than we normally do in our maintenance operations because you're dealing with high-speed arterials. It's also a lot more expense to that. That, I would say, cost per ton is a lot higher than you would if you're just overlaying. So we don't like to put it in a regular job because we spend a lot more money on the asphalt. And if we have to make any changes, it costs us more to do that work.
Say, Dave,
yes.
you changed your terminology just a little bit from when you did your paving 101.
Yes.
So a modification, that's just where we're changing the configuration of a street. That may involve paving as well, right?
That's correct. We may be doing some spot widening, lane channelization modifications, and usually involve some paving.
But rehabilitation wasn't on your paving 101 slide. You know, what do I assume rehabilitation means when I'm looking at this slide?
We're going to be basically grinding and overlay the existing street. When the sewer goes in, they'll go ahead and patch back, and we'll have an asphalt patch. We'll need to take out some medians and curb and gutter concrete. So we're not doing complete reconstruction, but we will be grinding and overlaying and then restriping. And I apologize for the difference in terminology there. As we move into our residential program, there's quite a lot of opportunity here for improvement too. We have residential street overlays. There's several of those going on. We'll be doing our annual slurry program again. That's the Newport Heights area. Park Avenue Bridge over the Grand Canal is also in here. We're doing the design right now. We're looking to get that programmed and get the construction started as soon as we can. Concrete pavement reconstruction, we have several streets that, again, will be taking out the existing pavement and putting concrete streets back in place. Annual sidewalk and curb and gutter program, that usually goes in our fall program where we try to get ahead of our slurry. This, again, took place in West Newport and will be heading to Newport Heights next year. Bay Avenue pavement construction, again, that's the one that I talked about, the $1.6 million we're carrying over. We'll be replacing that concrete street. And then on 16th Street, Balboa Boulevard pavement, we're looking to do some reconstruction on that street right across Balboa there.
Dave?
Yes.
On the slurry coating, it seems the slurry coating is moving ahead rapidly, but the striping is not following behind. Is there some reason for that?
Sometimes they'll cat track, and I know that there can be a little gap there. They have two contractors come in. We make them put tabs down. We make them cat track it so you can see it. It shouldn't be too far behind it. And I could look at any street that looks like that. I know 32nd Street, I think we're waiting on right now.
No, you started on that today.
That was being done today, yeah.
In fact, there are about 6 different lines on it right now. But I noticed some of the other streets, the numbered streets, were slurried, and they were slurried maybe a week ago, and there's been no striping.
That's probably the extent they would. They want to get enough there that the striper can come in and actually put the permanent striping down. If I could take a minute to go off on a different direction with 15th Street and Balboa. I wanted to put this out to council. This is something we'd like to add to our program this year. In those pictures, you can see, particularly on the bottom one, 15th Street is a 100-foot wide right-of-way. It has commercial around it here, and it crosses Balboa. This street's in relatively poor shape for the concrete in that area. We recently did the undergrounding project and cut through here on the alley towards the ocean front, and we replaced some of the concrete pavement there. But we wanted to kind of look at this on a more holistic thought. There's a lot of concrete here. We need to replace it. We thought maybe we'd want to try something where we add some landscaping in this commercial district. So you see a plan on the screen that basically kind of highlights some areas. We think we can maybe, by putting some landscaping in, maybe bulbing out. Oh, by the way, the signal in this location, too, is also old, needs replacement. They told me that a couple of years ago. I said, why don't we just hold off on replacing that until we can kind of look at the whole area. So we need to replace the signal. We need to replace the pavement in here. It might be a good opportunity to do some bulb outs, some landscaping, some channelization of our parking, and maybe even get to the point where you see going down towards the restroom on the beach so that we could add kind of a turnaround. There's a couple benefits out of that. I think we can increase the parking number by a couple, maybe 3 or 4 just on this. We could probably sharpen our pencils and get a little bit more. We could add some greenery and maybe revitalize this area. It is part of the end of our revitalization that we've been working on the peninsula. We also could probably add a turnaround right at the restroom there, which might help with some of the problems we have at Newport Elementary, where the cars stop on Balboa Boulevard. There's a lot of drop-off and pick-up there, and if we can get some of the schools to drop off here and walk the block, we might be able to resolve some of those issues, too. So we wanted to throw this out to council and see what your ideas are, thoughts are, if we could proceed with something like this. We'd want to start the design and then start working through the rehabilitation of it.
Can you point out where Newport Harbor Yacht Club is? Certainly an iconic institution.
I believe it's down Bay Avenue going further down. This would be right at 15th.
That's about 7th Street.
Okay, I thought it was right in there. No?
The American Legion would be at the top of your screen on that
Okay, so I'm
map.
seeing some boat racks. What's that there?
Those are the American Legion's boat racks.
Okay.
That's the American
It's a little
Okay,
dinghy
so that's
storage
American
area.
Legion.
This is the American Legion right here.
That's
This is
Veterans
Legion
Park.
Right there.
And then
Okay.
Marina Park is to the left off screen there.
Okay, I have my bearings. So then, if we were to add parking, that would sort of help out with the situation there where there is a lot of demand and a lot of activity?
It would. We've got a few spots anyway. We'd surely add greenery and a little better appeal to this area. It might help revitalize some of the businesses in there if we need to take the street out anyway.
You also have the potential to increase safety by the bulb outs for the pedestrians, making the crosswalks shorter to move across.
Right in this area, correct.
Well, I'd certainly support that. Seems to me if you're in there doing work and we can afford additional enhancements, it'd be good timing to do that.
This turnaround here, I think, would also help when we can get people to maybe drop off here and the kids could walk one block down here to the elementary school. It might help in that aspect. We will have to take this through the Coast Commission. We are touching the sand in this area, so I think we could get that through, but they get a little nervous when we touch the sand.
Dave, would 15th at all be considered a haul route or deliveries during the Marina Park construction?
We will have some of that. We are going to open a gate at 16th Street. I keep losing my pointer here. But this alley will now go through. Right now it dead ends right here. That'll eventually be open, and I'm probably going to take some construction access through here. So there will be some of that happening here, too. There's another item that happens in this area, and that's why the medians look a little strange. The school buses come through here, and they turn here, and they come through this alley and drop off. So we need to cut these medians back here and hold them back so the buses and trucks can move through there.
Conceptually, I really, really like this. I just would, from your standpoint, with the construction, just be mindful of the phasing.
Will do. So moving forward, street improvement projects. Neighborhood revitalization was a key here. So we have several of those in this program. We have the Bristol Street South medians that we put in at your request. We will fund that this year. The design is done. We're planning on starting that soon. Balboa Boulevard landscape revitalization. Those plans are underway. We just recently looked at them, made some modifications. We hope to get that started right after the end of the summer. Corona Del Mar Entry Plaza we talked about tonight, and would be looking for at the end of the presentation maybe some direction on how you'd like to proceed, funding, should we go ahead and develop the plans, work with the community a little more on that. Coast Highway, Santa Ana River to Newport Boulevard is our next rehabilitation that we want to look at from the revitalization standpoint. We have money in here this year to start that process. And then we have one item in here from 15th Street in Monrovia. We have some beautification up in that neighborhood that's probably sorely needed. That wasn't on the revitalization, but it does play into that neighborhood up there. Just a couple slides to kind of familiar with that. 15th Street in Monrovia is the top slide there. Basically, it's an edge of pavement, dirt strip against the mobile home park there. We'd like to landscape that. And then the lower slide there is a slide of South Bristol for the folks at home. Another goal for the council has been bikeway signals, making the city more ped-friendly. So this is an important program we're also looking at putting a lot of funds into. We're looking at putting $3.1 million in our traffic and ped and bike facilities. In this, again, is the East Bluff bike lanes. Those are currently under design. We're hoping to get those started relatively soon. We'd like to get those over the summer when the kids are out. Traffic signal rehabilitation, we're constantly working on our signals on that. We need to rehab about 2 or 3 a year. Bayside Cove walkway is in here. The plans are being done. We're looking to start this right after Labor Day. And then we'll be taking on the East Coast Highway signal rehabilitation. Those plans are actually under design. These are signals we inherited from Caltrans, and they're sorely in need of some improvements. The wiring's going, the fixtures are going. So we hope to do several of these signals next year on the construction side. Signal modernization, we have 2 phases left, both 6 and 8, and they'll be starting this fiscal year, and that'll complete our signalization modernization project.
Dave, is there any chance, I know we're working on the acquisition of Newport Boulevard there, just beyond the Arches Bridge. Is there any chance to sneak in those traffic lights in terms of synchronization and modernization?
Actually, I have some really good news for you on that, and Pat Thomas just got the email today that the CTC has approved it, and they're processing the resolution. The resolution will be filed. Once the resolution is filed, you'll be the new owners of .17 miles of street. That should happen in the next week. That'll give us the rights to go through. I know Brad Summers has already looked at ways to kind of get those signals up and running and coordinate them for the summer. So we'll need to do some work there. And then we'll probably come back when we do the Newport Boulevard widening to do a better rehab of the signals, probably a complete rehab of each one.
But we can have a stopgap plan in place to get the synchronization going sooner.
They have a plan. They're figuring out a way. They have to get into the cabinets, but they think they can start wiring them together and start having them talk to each other.
Dave, from where to where is the East Coast Highway signal rehab going to take place?
Starts at MacArthur and goes all the way out to Newport Coast. There are a couple signals in there. Just for instance, Marguerite was just done. There's a couple that we've done, but most of the signals along there will be Poppy, Hazel, will be Cameo Shores, will be rewired. New heads, new hardware, anything that's worn out on them. Sometimes we need new poles. Some of them will be done where they have center poles. Caltrans used to like the old center pole. We take that pole out and put a new arm to get rid of that.
One of the questions I get from people is that when we go through and replace these or rehab these signals and put in new control equipment, that the signal boxes seem to get bigger. And that seems to be counterintuitive since a lot of them are going from mechanical to solid-state devices. You have any comment on that?
And you're correct in that some of them have been getting bigger, and there's been more technology added. The other thing that's been added is battery backups. And they used to hang them on the back of the cabinet. Sometime you'll see a cabinet with a little kind of bulge out the back. They're putting that inside now, so some of the cabinets have been getting bigger. It has been something we've been talking to our traffic folks. Can we get those smaller? Can we add a little more beautification to those? So it's been noted. I don't know how much we can move in that direction then. There's one other comment on this, too, I know from the bid standpoint, and they asked us when we did the Marguerite signal if we could find a decorative light instead of the standard Cobra safety light, something that matches the street lights in Corona Del Mar. We are still working on that. We're hoping that we can put that into this project and retrofit those and put more like an acorn light in there. I did find one recently down in on El Toro Road that I pointed our folks to that shows that we can do an acorn safety light. We just have to find the manufacturer.
Now, this has been a multi-year citywide system build-up, and as part of it, we have some cameras, and then we have a room at City Hall, and the idea was there's going to be somebody to monitor things and make adjustments to get efficiencies. Do you have adequate staffing for that room, or, I mean, where are you in terms of getting those efficiencies?
We have been a little pressed. We use our daytime staff, and we have a laptop that our folks take home. We are still monitoring that. There are some efficiencies just by the new modernization. It can tell us things, and it will help us reduce our staff. This year, we're going to lose one of our technicians, but the city manager and I have talked, and we're going to bring on some contract folk to backfill that. And I think hopefully we can make that work and just run through that. At some point, though, we might want to come back and talk about additional staffing if you feel it's needed. We do, on special events, bring people in and cover that. It's been real helpful in that aspect. With that, I'll touch on modernization just for a minute. Again, I mentioned it's been real successful. We are now completed 6 phases in 4 years. That's pretty substantial when you look at other cities, how quickly they do it. We've done a great job in getting that through. If you remember, back in March 2009, we completed our first phase 1, and we're almost done with our entire city. With phase 1 through 5 and also 7 completed, that included 91 intersections. There's 28 new closed-circuit television cameras out there. We built a brand new traffic management center, which you saw in the new City Hall, and actually the public loved that one. It was one of the popular spots. That's increased the reliability of our system. It's improved our traffic flow. We've had quick response. I point to an instance we had this year when we had the king tides. We had a problem on Balboa Boulevard. You know, it's funny, we were watching the cameras, and the crews actually caught it before the police actually reported it in. We were able to adjust the timing and route people off Newport and onto Balboa Boulevard. So we have pretty good response to that when we know about it. The cameras have helped a lot on that. These are the last 2 phases here that I've talked about, and they're looking to be started construction in spring of 2014 and also fall of 2014 to finish the last 2 phases. So with that, we move to another area, parks, harbors, and beaches. And in that, we have a lot of projects in our Titlelands projects, $1.9 million. In there's also about $1 million worth of pier improvements. We have beach sand management again and minor dredging. And I'll point out the minor dredging is basically a couple things. There are some spot dredgings, but this will start the Seminole Slough and the Grand Canal efforts. We're trying to dredge both those. And I think there's a way we might be able to do the Grand Canal under our new RGP permit, so we're trying to include that. There's testing and things to start on the Seminole Slough, so we've got money in there for that. We also are working on our waste pump-out systems in the harbor. And since this has been printed, I've been informed 3 of them are done. There's 2 left. A couple weeks from now, they should be done on that project. And again, I apologize. This is a snapshot. So when we put the budget together, some of these things are in process. We do need to look at our ocean piers this year.
Tony has a question.
Dave, could I get you to clarify? You said that this year there's an allocation for the slough, and that is solely for testing. Could we start dredging in this year?
Probably not this year. There's quite a process to go through.
All right.
There's the encroachment permit thing. We're actually started the appraisals and looking at that. We have to deal with that. We're talking to state lands and multi-pass, trying to get it teed up. But we do need to start kind of the design, the testing and things, and eventually get to coastal with it.
Isn't there also an opportunity perhaps with the Port of Long Beach down the road that they may need some additional fill, and that would be a prime spot if there is, so we could do what we did here and save money?
That could be a possibility if we find those are the type of materials we come up with. So with that, we also have, I was mentioning the ocean piers, and we're going to include the harbor piers this year. We need some maintenance on several of our harbor piers, the floats, the platforms, the handrails, so we'll include that maintenance in here. We have to finish up on our mooring field realignment. We did about half this, as you know, with the dredging in the lower harbor, so we have the other half to do, about 5 fields left to realign. We're working on automating our tide gates and retrofitting those. We've got a continual program to change those out, and that seems to be going very well. It is relieving the staff from having to go out and turn those twice a day. Seawalls and bulkhead modifications, we continue to work towards a solution on Balboa Island and other bulkheads and seawalls we have around. And then we'll be completing our eelgrass survey, and this is the deep water survey this year, so we'll be looking at that to help with our eelgrass plan. We've got money in to do our RGP permit. Again, we'll try to include more in that, and I'd like to include the Grand Canal in that permit so we can get that permitted and done.
Dave, before
What's an RGP permit?
Regional general permit with the Corps of Engineers. That's how we can do some of our maintenance.
It eases, we hope, the dealing with eelgrass under residential and even commercial piers, so it's important to a lot of residents.
How has the change in the fees in the harbor area been reflected in this budget now?
We're going to talk more about that at your meeting on the 28th, where we'll show you what the estimated increment is and how that's set aside and how that goes into some of these projects, especially the capital side of things.
So you are operating as if State Lands Commission was on board with our allocation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But again, with the expectation that this budget year doesn't start until July 1st.
Understood.
Yeah.
Several significant park projects we hope to get going this year. 2 of them are well into the process. We're hoping for our coastal permits on Marina Park and Sunset Ridge. Anytime, I'd like to surely start Marina Park right after the Labor Day if we get our permits. Sunset Ridge is a little further behind on that, but it is proceeding through the process. We have 3 other parks that we'll be adding this year to start the process. Backview Vape, I'm sorry.
Wait, Dave, let me, because I have these backwards. We're still waiting for the permit for Marina Park, even though it's been approved. I thought we had the permit issued for Sunset Ridge. Is that not correct?
Neither park has their permit yet. They've both been approved by the commission, and now we're going through the staff process to have the plans approved and all the conditions met before they actually issue the permit.
Didn't we get the letter on Marina Park that the permit was in the mail?
I thought it was in the mail. It's still,
That's
apparently
something
the
your
mail
city
is
manager
slow.
believes, so correct us all if we're wrong. That I thought I remember an email saying, hey, it's on its way.
Well, we did get our notice of intent to issue the permit. So the first thing they do after they have the commission action, they issue a notice to intent to issue a permit. Then they go through and issue the permit after. But we have to, that basically shows you, here's all the conditions, here's what we've agreed upon, you need to meet this, and part of that is we want a complete set of plans, we want to review and approve, we want a parking study, we want a coyote study, and then they'll check those off and issue the permit. So we're close, I hope. The 3 other parks, too, Back Bay View Park, we want to do some enhancements to that park.
Will we be seeing something on that? I see we have little sketches of Sunset View Park and the Pocket Park. Back Bay View Park is such a problematic park. I'd really like to see, before we commit to that, exactly what we're going to be spending on. Don't frown at me, Ed.
Well, I'm not frowning. I'm just stating that we had done some work on that before it was cut out of the budget, so we need to dig those out of the files and bring them back.
So let's put that on for the 28th, a brief discussion item on those plans.
And then Sunset View Park, we've started that discussion. Again, I'll point to the two sketches. And then there's also a discussion about a pocket park in CDM that we have a little presentation coming up. This is the Sunset View Park concept. We've worked with Councilmember Petros and the community above it, the Balboa Villas, and we've basically finalized this. Pat took this to the Park Harbors and Beaches Committee recently, and they believe this concept is doable and they like it. So we'd like to move forward with design and maybe getting this into coastal as soon as possible. We will have to go and get a coastal permit on this project, so there is some time involved in that. The next park we included this year is the Corona Del Mar Park, and I'd like to actually see if Mr. Selich would like to talk about this. It's been a long effort, I understand, and I'm just coming up to speed on this, but he's been working on this for some time.
Thanks, Dave. When the vision plan was originally come up with, I guess about 14 years ago, there was an opportunity identified to take in the lower left-hand side of the slide there's a lawn area near Hobie Sports to re-landscape that into a pocket park with a seating area and some landscaping. So a few years ago, Ron Yo came up with a concept plan that's in the upper right-hand corner of the slide that shows a little semicircular seating area off of the highway with the terraced landscaped area going up the slope, and the idea there was to do a demonstration kind of a garden that would show folks how they could landscape their yards with water-wise and California-friendly plants. And just recently, the opportunity came forward to actually obtain the property. The property owner has agreed to donate the land, I should say, to the city. And this has been presented to the Corona Del Mar Business Improvement District, and the board has voted to support the project. It's also been presented to the Corona Del Mar Residents Association Board of Directors and at their annual meeting, and was received with enthusiasm, I would say, from those groups. So asking that it be funded in this year's capital improvement program.
So with that, we've added $90,000. We believe we can get that park built once we get clearance of it, and we look.
It's not in the coastal zone.
So it'll be moving rather quickly. Our next category is our water quality and environmental. We have $4.9 million. We're looking to do habitat vegetation, trail modifications, and just basically improve that local area. This would be the Big Canyon area downstream of Jamboree Road heading into the bay there. We also have money in here for the Newport Coast ASBS Protection Plan. This is something we have an ASBS. This is an area of special biological significance off the coast, just outside of Little Corona, going down south of the coast towards Crystal Cove. And we have certain things we have to do to meet the ocean plan requirements on this. Santa Ana Delhi project, there's money in here from a settlement that actually improves the Santa Ana Delhi channel. This is a channel coming out of Costa Mesa and Santa Ana that comes into the upper Newport Bay. We're looking to do some kind of trash collection system, maybe a low-flow diversion that takes out some of the low-flow oils and metals and stream coming into the bay there. And then our last program in here is our Metropolitan Water District program, where we have an irrigation replacement and water reduction program. We originally, if you recall, had a program in for about $1 million. $750,000 came from the state. The city put up $150,000, and IRWD put up $150,000 to do retrofits on controller systems and sprinkler heads to reduce the runoff. We got rebates from that from the state and actually from ODOT in the amount of $70,000, and council gave us direction to reprogram that into the budget, and that's what you see here.
Dave, speaking of water, going back to the Big Canyon Reservoir, I saw an email from staff a week or so ago. We drained the reservoir?
Yes.
Did we just drain it all that potable water just went out? Or did we use it? I mean, were we able to transfer it so we could use it, or did we just go all those millions of gallons, or however many hundreds of thousands of gallons, or whatever?
We use as much as we can out of that. They draw it down. They continually put it into the system, but there is a portion at the bottom that we can't use.
Okay, but we didn't just open the spigot for all of it.
No, we.
I'm so
use it into
relieved.
the
Thank you.
system. So we do have some improvements to our water system also. Not a whole lot of money this year, $2.6 million. We're doing some work on Newport Boulevard in advance of the modification project. We need to replace fittings and valves and some other work, maybe line some mains in there. We have some cathodic protection we need to do to keep our metal water mains in good shape. We have some aging cast iron mains that need to be replaced. This is an ongoing master plan project. And then we have a pump station and well upgrade. These are variable speed drives that we put in, and they're actually helping with the energy efficiency. They reduce the consumption of electricity by quite a bit, so we're looking to put those improvements in place. Under the wastewater system, a very minor amount of money, about $450,000 in this category. We have some diversions up in the port streets, which happen to comply to help our selenium problem over in that area. We have a sewer in the St. James Road area that we need to relocate. It's on the mid-slope. We want to get it out of the slope and address that. We do some point repairs every year. We find little settlements and breaks in the pipe that we have to take care of. And we're looking at additional efforts in our water master plan rate study that will be coming through. And then we have one last class. It's our miscellaneous class. Not a lot of money in here. There's some rebudget money for our local coastal program, and also we're carrying a little money forward for buying Rule 28 credits. I would note that I did get contacted by a city that we found another $80,000 in credits, so we'll be looking to purchase those soon and add to our pot to help start the undergrounding on Balboa Boulevard. With that, we come to our summary slide, and this is it's a snapshot of our overall CIP, all the various categories there, and the rebudgets and budgets. $61 million is the total that we'll be looking to program this year. And a little different picture of that, how it breaks down. And I'm looking at grants, contributions. Councilmember Petros, you asked about the arterials. A lot of that is under grants. 24% of our budget is basically coming out of that. We also get, in our road program, most of it comes out of OCTA under Measure M Competitive. Another way to look at our budget breakdown here, if you're interested, again, $61 million in the different programs and how it breaks down.
Where does, Dave, going back to the funding by source slide, does all the park fee money we get, is that in the master facilities, master plan segment? Is that where that money is at?
Yes, for like the big parks, it'd be in the master facilities.
That's where all the park fees go?
Right.
Okay, thanks.
With that, again, the good news that we see in our budget, we are improving our neighborhoods. They're being beautified. We've got more parks underway. As you can see, there's several underway, hopefully construction soon, and others in the pipeline to start construction. Our pavement index has been improving. We're heading towards council's goal of a citywide average of 80. We're putting $5 million of general fund investment back into the program, which is helping us move forward on a lot of these efforts. We're starting to do much more investment in the harbor. And again, the synchronization of our signals is just about complete. We're looking forward to completing that effort. There are a couple items that I wasn't sure what to do with, and we wanted to kind of get your direction tonight, or as the budget proceeds. We have our Corona del Mar entry project we talked about tonight. You saw that the concept that we came back with, and we'd like your kind of direction. Should we include the design and or the construction in the budget effort? Right now, we show it as $50,000 as contribution. The bid talked about maybe helping out to some extent. I'm not sure where council would like to go on that.
Well, if we do have to go to coastal on that, that's a year right there, isn't it? I mean, or is this something that we could get through the Coastal Commission more quickly?
I doubt it. We're going to have to solve the parking problem. It's probably a year, so we could just program the design.
Yes.
The question would be, does the bid fund it? Does the city fund it? Is it a joint effort?
I think that in what Bernie said, that they will contribute, whether it's because part of the money that we contribute, which is counted towards it or what, but I think that they would. But I wouldn't include anything for construction because I just don't think we'll be ready.
But remembering the CAP meetings, there was a legitimate discussion over whether there was a disagreement as to whether or not this would have to go to coastal. And so I think that needs some further review. I would be supportive of placing the money in for the construction and then rolling it forward if, in fact, we couldn't get to it. But I would hate to see us lose momentum if, in fact, we got the design done and had the finding that we didn't have to go to coastal, and then we'd just be stalling and waiting for it to happen. So I would rather see the funds left in.
We could, if you like, for council's desire, we could program the design, and knowing that you'd like to move forward at an expedited rate, should we get through the design and should we find that coastal is not a problem, we could come back and program the construction money mid-year if you like.
We can do a budget adjustment quickly to pick up the funding.
And there was a question about how much about coastal and environmental. The environmental is in the $50,000. Coastal, I'm hoping it's not a big effort. We'll do the application, we'll put it in, shouldn't be too much of it. We're already paying for the parking study, that will probably have to go with it. And then hopefully there's not a lot of cost on that. The other one was...
What was the mayor sort of directing here? You had made a comment.
I said I agree with Mr. Young.
So what I understood is we'll include the design, the contribution will come from the bid. We'll go ahead and do that. Should we find that we can construct it this year, we'll bring it back to council and try to get the money appropriated. The other one was West Coast Highway Landscaping.
Not try, will.
We will. I'll put will next to that. Okay.
We'll try.
West Coast Highway Landscaping, we want to start that effort. It is a substantial design cost. There's a lot of construction costs there.
Now, is this isn't the one, help me out, because we were talking about two different ones.
This is the landscaping improvements on West Coast Highway from Newport Boulevard to the Santa Ana River.
Okay, so that is to the entrance, the entryway. Oh, good, okay.
And we currently have $100,000 in there to start the effort. We have to probably take the concepts a little further. We have to meet with Caltrans. We've had dialogues with the deputy director and the director. We may need to put a little more push on it there to get some movement on their part. We actually are meeting with Huntington Beach that has a similar problem, and they want to sit down with us and kind of teamwork against Caltrans to see if we can move some of these projects forward and get larger landscape trees on there. There is additional design effort. We could come back and ask for this later once we see what the horizon looks like, or we could program it in.
Dave, we have such momentum right now going with the Balboa Boulevard landscape plan, the undergrounding of the utilities, the good efforts that you've made with Huntington Beach to try and do some collaboration to not take advantage here in my mind at least, would be penny wise. I really would encourage you to move forward as much as you feel comfortable expeditiously to get this going. I'd like to see this plan done, and I know the residents of West Newport want this project completed.
Yeah, from my perspective, this is the last major gateway to the city that really needs to be upgraded, and I'd agree with those comments that we need to fund whatever it takes to make sure that we can just roll straight ahead on this to get it teed up for construction at a later date.
Yeah, I'm also in support of it, obviously, but seems like a pretty high price for the design funding. What did we pay for the Balboa, or what's our contract for Balboa Boulevard?
Off the top of my head, it's several hundred, $250, $300 probably.
$300.
This construction cost, again, I didn't bring that, I apologize. It was $4 to $5 million, I believe, for that length. It's a pretty lengthy piece of project. This also included the intersection, the completion of the Balboa and Superior Coast Highway intersection. We're doing one half it now. There's the other half to do. So
does this include going up the hill on Superior, or is that a separate project?
That was a separate project.
That's a separate, okay.
And this could be high. This was just the estimate that we came out of the CAP meetings with. We'd surely sharpen our pencils. There's more effort here. Caltrans and probably conceptual talks and things, but we'll try to keep that as tight as possible. So I'm hearing to include this, and I need to look at my city manager. This is above and beyond the $5 million.
Our $1 million surplus is.
I think we need to. I think the consensus here is we need to proceed on this. I think there's some cautions that you've laid in front of us about why we're probably not going to be able to spend this much money next year. So let's, as we're doing with Corona Del Mar, take this in a way that moves the project and doesn't delay the project, but also recognizes the actual schedule of the project.
And my thought was the $100,000 gets us going and gets it started, and if we could, again, add to it if we get some milestones broken free. So we will definitely get pushing on this, and we will work on this one.
We're only halfway down the page, too.
The next one on here is another item that we've been addressing. The regional board has a TMDL on selenium, and it affects the Big Canyon watershed. We did a lot of testing a couple years ago. We worked with the board on this. We're trying to knock down the levels of selenium. Selenium is a naturally occurring element in this formation out there, and the irrigation water and other things are picking up the selenium and moving it downstream. One of the identified goals was to remove the sediments in the Big Canyon Golf Course lakes. There are 4 lakes in there. The sediments have built up over the years. There's a lot of selenium sitting in there, which turns to selenite, which is the problem. The recommendation is to remove those sediments as we move forward. It's about $400,000. Big Canyon has talked to us, and they said they're interested in going half on one of the lakes because it's more of an aesthetic issue with them, but the rest of the lakes are really nothing of their concern, so they're willing to work with the city, but we'd have to pay the cost on that.
So is this the net or the gross for all that, for that project?
The gross, as I understand.
Okay.
Do we feel that this is the major source? We've done enough testing to say we're pretty sure that this is where it's coming from, most of it?
We know that this is a source. I don't know if it's the major. It's because of a lot of it's being resuspended out of the lake. But we also have some other things. We're trying to do the diversions upstream. We have some hot spots coming out of the port street, so if we can divert that flow, that'll take care of a portion of it. If we take care of the lakes, we think we'll knock it down to a level so when it gets down to the lower portion, which is below Jamboree and where we're trying to do some work down there, it'll be at a level that's not a concern to the regional board.
Well, I think the project started with one lake, Lake 4, which is a water hazard on the 4th hole at the country club, and they were motivated to have it dredged because of aesthetic reasons, the shallow water and the algae growth. It kind of looked bad, smelled bad kind of a thing. And then we agreed, or there was an agreement to cost share. What's the cost of that one lake? The city's share and the golf club share?
The number that comes to mind is, I think it was $150,000.
It's like 50,000 or something.
Yeah, they were going to do about 70 or 5.
Okay, so then beyond the one lake, which we agree to cost share, then there was 3 additional lakes brought in more recently?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the idea was the settlement funds from Irvine Company and Defend the Bay were going to pay, and they're not buying it. They don't want to use the money for this. So it's a question of whether or not we want to use general funds for the additional lakes.
I thought there was some other agency funding that was going to help on this situation. Did I misunderstand that?
We had talked about, at one point, there was going to be a regional approach to it, but the regional approach got ridiculously expensive. And so basically with the Newport Bay stakeholders, was said, well, we'll take care of this. We'll take care of our problem, and you go take care of your upstream problems. We want to be really sure, though. This is a considerable chunk of cash that we are taking care of the major part of the problem, because if we're going to spend this kind of money and then we have another $1 million when we turn around, this is something we should be, this is groundwater, I'm assuming. It's seeping into the groundwater. That's
correct.
The issue. So that's a hard one to deal with. But if when will we be diverting the upstream hot spots?
The design's being constructed now. I don't have a quite date. Do you know when we're going to actually put those in place?
The design should be complete within, I would say, the next 30 to 60 days, so it could be before the end of this calendar year.
Do we have any idea how much that's going to take out?
It'll take off quite a lot. The hot side is the southern side coming out of the port streets. There's 2 streams that go through Big Canyon Golf Course. The north side of it is relatively clean from selenium for some reason, so we're going to be diverting the hot creek, the hot spots, and we hope that knocks it down to level that is manageable, basically. But these lakes are on that hot side.
Right. Well, I'm just wondering if we wouldn't do the first lake and the diversion and see what we've got.
I think that's just a really practical approach. I totally support that. And then we have some cost sharing from the country club as well.
And then if it doesn't, if we need to go back, well, then we can address it at that time. But we may have solved our problem, and that would be great.
So when we're talking about diversion, that's an underground piping system going through the golf course? Is that what we're talking about?
It's going to the sand district.
We're actually diverting to the sewer.
Yeah.
We're taking the low flow and putting it into the sewer system.
So
they're taking it out.
Going in above the golf course or below the golf course?
Above the golf course.
Above the course.
Before it comes in. They have, on their lakes, they have reciprocal pumps that just take the same water and keep it going. So it's nuisance water going through the golf course right now.
And I think in meetings with Larry Tucker, his priority was that lake number 4. I think that's what they were looking to do.
If that's your recommendation, I think we could cut this down to, say, 100,000, just do the match with them, take care of one lake, do the diversions, then do some retesting and see where we stand, and if we have to do some more work down the road, that would be acceptable, too. It's going in the right direction.
And I think the regional board, we would show progress that we were working on it, and so they wouldn't necessarily come down with a hammer just because we hadn't solved it all immediately.
Either that or the West Newport landscaping.
So the last project I had on here, I know there are others, but Nancy had brought this up before. We have been working on our streetlight system. The city owns its own streetlights. It's actually in a good position now that we look at that. But there is maintenance that needs to be done. We have a lot of what they call series lights. The lights run series circuits versus parallel. They're old and wearing out. So we've been deliberately going through and changing those out. And as we've been doing that, we've been also changing over an LED technology, which has really been beneficial. On the energy side, we're getting a good payback. We're also seeing the residents really like these lights. I think that it's a great solution, but we just didn't have enough money in the budget this year, so I didn't include this, but you brought it up. The next two circuits are about $665,000, and this is not something we have to do this year, but I just put on the list of things that were not funded.
How much do we save in energy costs over a period?
I don't have exact number. I should have brought that fact with me.
Could we get something for our next meeting and look at that?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
How many streetlights is that?
Gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't bring that. I will bring that too. It's two circuits, and I got to think it's in the, unless Iris is here, and I'll get that number for you too. So with that, I conclude on that, unless there's any other questions or items we didn't catch on items that didn't get funded.
Any other questions for staff? Mr. Petros?
When we were in our Finance Committee meeting, Dave, I raised the question that I'm in the enviable position that I get to plan, but you get to do. And you've heard it from the dais already, the number of things that we'd like to see done. What would you characterize as the primary barrier to these rebudgets? Is it permitting? Is it the lack of professional staff to advance projects? How can this council help you get more of these things done? Because if it is something that's within our control, if it's a finite resource that you just don't have enough of, I would much rather see us achieve these ends than have to rebudget because we're trying to hold the line on contract consultants or professional staff or whatever it may be.
To answer that question fairly, I think permitting would be our biggest hurdle. The council's been very fair. We have plenty of money to do the projects. You provide us with excellent consultants and contract administrators to do this. I'm blessed to have a wonderful staff. We have a lot of great talent on our staff. We just basically do the meat and potatoes stuff, and we put out all the special stuff out to consultants. But as I've seen, particularly the coastal permits is where we've really gotten hung up, and I'm embarrassed that the two big projects we want to go are stuck in the coastal. A lot of our stuff is regulatory driven. A lot of our projects are Caltrans can be another hurdle at times. So anything we can do in that aspect, probably your efforts, and you've already given us direction to process our own local coastal plan, that would help immensely in some of our smaller projects where we'd have to do, like for instance, Corona Del Mar entry project. That would just be done internally and we wouldn't end up at the Coast Commission. So those are the two biggest hurdles I think that we could address. There's a staffing issue once in a while. I was talking to Mr. Kiff about that, maybe trying to add a checklist item to bring in some additional management staff to help drive some of the projects. Having Pat on board has really helped in bringing some more attention to some of these projects. We do have a huge workload, as you can see, and you looked at our chart with the budget going up. Our staffing has relatively stayed the same since the 1990s and the 2000s, and our workload has gone through the roof. And these are more complex projects now. That it's not just street designs; it's environmentally challenging projects, and it's in sensitive areas. So, but permitting is where we get stuck most of the time.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, you have a question?
I was just going to comment that I was very pleased with the report and very pleased with the project list.
Thanks. Mr. Mayor and council members, we've been talking a long time. You've been talking a long time with us. We could stop here and take public comment if you want, and then we could finish up next time.
Yeah, I think that's probably a wise course of action.
Just fine. And I also have a list of things I've heard from you. I'm just going to restate them for the record that you want brought up next time, and we have some things on our own. So before you close, either
All right.
public comment before or after.
Let me open this up. Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak on the budget hearing? Please come forward.
Mayor Curry and members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. We just heard about this so-called rebudgeting of unspent funds for capital improvement projects from one fiscal year to the next, and I was kind of wondering if rebudgeting is a misnomer, since it creates the impression that the council has the discretion to use that money for some different, perhaps even a non-capital improvement purpose in the coming year. I would have thought, and I kind of heard it stated, that once we allocate funds for a particular improvement project, there is an implicit promise or commitment that the money will be used for that project, even if it takes more than 1 year. So that the rebudgeting, if I'm understanding it correctly, is automatic, or if it's not, shouldn't it be? I bring this up because the drafters of our city charter thought that such long-range and irrevocable commitments were so essential to the orderly development of our city that they set up a legal mechanism for accomplishing exactly that in Charter Section 1113, both for individual projects and for capital improvements generally. Indeed, when they adopted the Charter in 1954, the people themselves set up a dedicated general capital improvement fund such that once the council put money in, that council and future councils could not raid the fund for general operations or any other purpose. So I'm wondering if we might get some clarity today as to whether any of the capital improvement funds that we've been hearing about are that raid-proof fund that was created by the people in 1954. And if none of them are, where is that non-discretionary capital improvement fund, and what balance does it have in it today? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Okay, I'll bring it back then. Mr. Kipp, do you want to go through the list that you have there, and we'll just sign off on that? And
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's some typical housekeeping things that we'll bring to you. We do this once a year. We show you the position count, what positions would be new, what would be deleted. We show you your the allocations from your discretionary accounts. That's because of a council policy. We'll talk about reserves next time and how the reserves are impacted by the budget here. If you have checklist items, and just for the public's edification, the checklist is if you have things that they're often small items that you want us to bring back to you between the proposed budget and the adopted budget. Now is the time. You can, of course, email me with those, or you can bring them up on the 28th. We do kind of want to bless it on the 28th, though, so that we can go into the 11th without a lot of changes to that. We'll talk about some kind of quirky things, the film liaison decisions and the bid support and NBTV potentially, because that's going to be a budget consideration. We'll talk about special event support, a recommendation from staff as to what the level of special event support should occur. Councilmember Daigle has asked in the past for a brief summary of how we allocate tidelands, so I'll have a hopefully 4 to 5 minutes on that in your presentation. We'll also talk about Back Bay View Park circuits, streetlight circuits, and finally we'll spend a little bit of time in the Civic Center and the FFP.
okay, everybody clear with that? Okay. Let me ask for public comments on the study session or regular meeting item agendas. Closed session, please come forward.
Thank you again, Mayor Curry and members of the council. My name again is Jim Mosier, and I would like to speak to you about the airport settlement agreement. I never understood why the settlement discussions over the last year or two needed to be secret, and looking back now, I continue not to understand why secrecy was necessary. But those discussions have been concluded, and as I understand it, we're now in a brief moment of light before the county and the city go back into more secret talks to hammer out the details of an environmental impact report, which I suspect will, after much expenditure of money, conclude that the impacts of airport expansion will be benign or at least tolerable. We have heard that this EIR will be completed by early 2014, and I don't know how realistic that is. That's barely more than 6 months away, and it seems a remarkably short time in which to prepare and review and circulate a major report that hasn't yet even reached the scoping stage. And I'm not sure it's a good idea for the city to pre-commit to endorsing an EIR, finding expansion tolerable. But since we have, I would like to make one suggestion to you, which is to ask you to hold firm on what the no project alternative, that is the alternative against which any airport expansion will be judged, what that alternative should be. The last time the county prepared a settlement agreement, EIR, was 12 years ago in 2001, and at that time, the no project alternative was not to assume that the existing legal limitations would go away, but rather to assume that the existing limitations and restrictions would stay in place for all time. We need to insist on that again, and this time not just to insist that a continuation of the existing agreement will be studied, but that it will be regarded as a serious and quite possible alternative. In fact, it is the alternative that requires the least effort of any, and getting to county to accept that, the continuation of the current restrictions as the environmentally dictated best alternative would be the one best thing you could do to salvage a situation that at the moment does not look particularly favorable to us. There may be some cynics among you who say that's impossible and we can't do that, but I would just say to you, why can't we? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned until 7 o'clock.